Oh, hey, look. We have patch notes for 6.1. Let's see what's in here. Okay, that looks cool. Oh, nice. I won't be permadead when I fall anymore. That's pretty cool. Well, Kyle, we've been playing consistently since November, and now we are here for our first big Final Fantasy XIV patch. And you might be out there thinking, wait a minute, I've watched you a-holes. You got to Stormblood, and now you're on a MSQ vacation doing Warring Triad and other awesome things from Heaven's Ward that's not required for MSQ, but what do you have to say about 6.1? And that's where I would go. That's what's cool about this. There's a lot of changes coming to 6.1 that are not endgame specific. There's a lot of quality of life updates, a lot of new coats of paint being put on some really old parts of Final Fantasy XIV. And there's a lot of things changing for new players and players like us who are currently leveling. So today, we thought it would be fun to give 2 Sprouts impressions on patch 6.1, and that's exactly what's going to be happening. And if you didn't know, that's us. We're the Sprouts.
The Realm Reborn has been reborn again.
Welcome to Final Fantasy XIV, a Realm Reborn reborn.
Reborn. All the dungeons have been spruced up in some way, the MSQ dungeons. There's brand new AI party members. We're going to talk about all that include the beefy final dungeons that come with a Realm Reborn. So, spoiler alert for 2.0 and its final moments.
To kick things off, a little spoiler light, we're going to talk about the new duty support system, which basically means you can play through a Realm Reborn truly solo. And you went and tried this out, Kyle, right? You gave our new AI companions for a Realm Reborn a little test run.
I did. It's very chill. It's very quiet. Naturally, they follow your lead. You have to assign all the pools, but the tank gets right on in there, starts grabbing a hold of everything. You may get a little slap to the face, but nothing dramatic. They're snappy, and they participate in all the mechanics, which throughout all these MSQ dungeons have been spruced up to match the mechanics you will see later in game, including the visuals you'll see through things like Heaven's Ward and beyond. So it's a fabulous learning experience seeing all the AI participate in those activities. I tried out healing, which early dungeon, there's not a lot of healing to do. I think this is now the best way to learn a damage class, opposed to something like even Palace of the Dead. This is just so calm and lets you really lead the way. And for tanking, I think it'd be a fabulous tool.
I believe if any team could figure it out, it would be the devs behind Final Fantasy XIV, but I have to imagine teaching AI to pull, when to pull, how to pull, when it's appropriate to pull. That'd be some hella code.
Yeah, and you'd be right back in the old feeling of the previous Duty Finder racing to catch up as AI take the lead. So here you are very much in control, get to see the sights, get to look at the boss before you pull, watch your abilities, set your own pace. It's an extremely welcoming thing for any new player to do.
That's rad. I think it's something I would have liked when I first started playing. At this point, I really like the social experience. I'm having a really good time. I can really only conjure from memory one somewhat negative social experience I had in a dungeon run. I like it as it is, but it would have been nice to have this as an option when I first got started. So I think this is a really nice addition. And I have a lot of friends that are put off by what they see as forced socialization through the way things used to work, which is you start your game in Final Fantasy XIV, you play it. Essentially, it's a solo game where people wearing amazing outfits hang out in hub cities. But then suddenly you're like, oh no, I have to go to a dungeon and it has to be with real people. I'm afraid. And I have quite a few friends like that. So I think they're going to really enjoy this. And if nothing else, it's just one more piece that fits into this cornucopia that makes Final Fantasy XIV feel like such a complete package. I really like it a lot. Seems like a good addition.
That gauntlet that you hit, right where Sastasha, Tamtara Deepcroft, and Copperbell Mines just hit you back to back to back. I'm sure the devs have data on that. and the fall off that happens with players afraid to interact. The community's been awesome, and I loved getting to learn alongside them. I thought it was such an amazing opportunity to meet and greet that community. But if this is your cup, this is going to work just fine.
Well, let's talk about the thing I was the most curious about, and I think a little bit you were too, the revamped dungeons. And when I say revamped dungeons, I also mean revamped raids that have become now dungeons or trials. A lot of changes.
Tons of changes. And the main through line here is just readability. You are going to learn all of those group up and tank busters and spread out mechanics through the basic dungeons. We've played through this game recently, and a lot of these don't even get seen until Nidhogg. That's how far in you experience your first indicators.
We ran together Thousand Maws, Castrum, Praetorium, and Ultima weapon, and there's indicators all over those dungeons and trials. So many of the boss fights bring in those universal indicators. So Thousand Maws of Totorak, how do they word it here in the notes? It just says it talks about certain mechanics and extensive changes to general progression. Kyle, hello. This should be shown under the definition of underselling.
This is you got rid of the slow pools. You got rid of the random spider walls that would pop up and block people out and have to be destroyed. You got rid of the maze that made you get lost in there. The part where you had to go grab the orbs or something to summon the plant bosses, they're just there already. Like, what a streamline.
Yeah, because I ran it a couple times. It's not, Thousand Maws is not really seared in my memory. So I'm really glad I ran it with you because you seem to remember it better, or maybe, I don't know. Did you study up before this? Be honest.
No, I just like the duty roulette for healing. So that's my evening activity. I've seen it a lot.
All right, cool. Guys, well, I'm glad it was a treat to run it with you because you were like, oh, look at the grass on the ground and the slow pulls are gone. And all this other stuff. All I remember is like doing this the first time as a summoner and obviously following a tank that knew what they were doing, knew where they were going, and not really thinking much of it, having a good old time. Like, it seemed a little slow because of literal slowing elements and whatnot, but didn't have to think about it too bad. Then, I start Heaven's Ward, and if you've been following the channel along, you know that once I started Heaven's Ward, I made a big swap over to Dark Knight and taught myself how to tank, and I spent a lot of time in Duty Roulette, and oh my god, the first time I got in Thousand Maws of Totorak, I was so lost, and it was really early on. I think it was literally day one of me learning how to tank in FF14. It filled me with a great sense of anxiety, because I had no idea where I was going.
It's a cute idea, the old RPG elements of a maze-like atmosphere and an actual temple that you're making your way through. This was a ported-in 1.0 dungeon that has now been completely modernized. And it looks great. It has some great sunbeams. You really kind of feel the storyline of this forest temple decaying as you get deeper in. It's taken over by spiders.
This was the first thing we did on stream this week, and I was really impressed. I was just like, damn, look at this thing. We haven't even gotten the visual update yet. The game-wide one, right? Where they're going to be making a big pass on how lighting and everything functions. I can't wait to see what it looks like there. It was good. It was good stuff. But the dungeon improvement doesn't stop there because Castrum is now a dungeon. And also, boy, I guess it got a Peloton or something because Castrum cut weight like a champ.
Oh, did it? Man, what a streamline. It was so clean. It was personal. And that's what really impressed me about Castrum and Praetorium is I felt like I was doing these things, not running to catch up with people participating in cutscenes that I was watching for the first time. I was there for the first time. And again, there's tons of visual mechanics that you're participating in, and some of them are really, really fun. In particular, the final boss of Castrum, huge upgrade for what is a story moment.
It's a proper dance.
Yeah.
Listen, I know you know me. Greatest MMO player on earth, never make a mistake. I actually got hit by some things in that fight.
I actually died.
It's right, you did. You did. And I had switched off because we had some lovely community members who were like, we'll tank, we'll heal. You guys take a day off. Go do some damage. And I was there on a summoner, Kyle, not resurrecting you.
We all have to pay our dues at the end of the day. But no more ramp things, no more cannon things, no more side mechanics that you wouldn't know just walking into it. Just a great bit of story that really, really adds to the climax. And as you head towards Praetorium, which is now from that 8-man down to a 4-man, oh, do you feel this? Just really, you're there, you're the insurgent, and not racing to catch up or panicking to hit the button in order to get downstairs fast enough so the ads don't kill you.
I hadn't thought about. I mean, there's still buttons to hit, right? But what was there? One pack of trash?
What, like 2 dudes standing there?
Yeah, it was super manageable. I really, thinking back on it now and trying to think of it through the lens of what if this was my first time running through there? I think it is just an infinite improvement. I did like some of the old, mid-dungeon cinematics that took place, but in the grand scheme of things, like thinking about the reality of where this exists in a game and a game system where old content is still relevant for players that have been here since the beginning, and knowing that you're going to have that mix. There's always going to be those new players coming up through that get thrown in with someone who's doing it for their 70th time. And I think this is a really good middle ground, and the fights are way better. First of all, they're not over immediately, which is important, but they have meaningful mechanics that I think are teaching you the game. Like, if I had done these fights before we went and fought Nidhogg, I think we would have died at least one time less, if not more.
Absolutely. The arrival of the first boss was changed. The streamlining that happened throughout getting to the Magitech armor, just how short that was. We calculated this to be about 15 to 20 minutes shorter than its previous version. It still has some problems, like the Nero family call argument with Sid is still long and really, really girthy. It lost momentum there. That's really my only complaint, is there was such strength moving through the facility, and then we had to listen to them bicker on the phone. But the fight, the Nero fight, was vastly improved, and again, way more interesting.
I am right there with you on Nero. That's where I was suddenly aware. I was like, oh, and I get it. This is why people are memeing in the chat. Because up until that point, I'm like, yeah, coming out of Castrum gives such momentum, it felt like to me. Did it feel like that way to you?
Oh, yeah.
Running from Castrum into Praetorium. It's just, you're just going and you're like, look at this. You're going at such a good clip. Obviously, new players, this will just be the experience. But looking at it here on patch day, I just keep thinking about that sense of momentum. And then the non-voice acted Nero scene happens. And you're like, okay, it's time to check my inbox. See what people are talking about on Twitter.
It's a
maybe make
big
a sandwich.
Stall. You hit the elevator with Gaius, and I'm all for it. I think that speech is phenomenal in Japanese. I think that it has a lot of energy. He goes Super Saiyan. That fight is really cool now, and there's a lot of dodging mechanics. He feels like a proper endgame boss.
Yeah, I will say I think the elevator scene feels long again. It's better because it's voice acted, and I love Gaius. I do think it could be cut down a little bit, but this is me splitting hairs. For the fact that we're sitting here talking about it, that's really, I think, the only reason I'm thinking about it. If you had to leave something in whole hog, I'm glad it was that, because Gaius is the best. Maybe I just need to switch it over to Japanese. Maybe that would fix it for me, Kyle.
It does help, but really,
hopefully what if? Hear me out. You walk on the elevator, little pop-up comes up. We highly recommend you watch this next scene in Japanese. Would you like to change?
That'd be nice. Plus, it's a tiny bit shorter. I was done with my cutscene before you.
Didn't matter because you still had to wait for me.
I did have to wait for you on the other side. Is there a universe where this is but the first improvement? Can we take the Nero phone call and make it happen while we're playing, while we're walking? Can we push the Gaius elevator scene on top of a building, perhaps, and we see him make that speech before he walks into the Praetorium, and then we just cut that out? It's just, the only reason I complain is because the energy in the room moving after the first boss of Praetorium felt so good. It felt so awesome to be in there, like we were winning the day.
My defense of it is that if you have to make a call on the replayability for the seasoned players or the first time experience for new MSQ players, I think the better call is to weight it towards that new player experience. Make sure that they get a solid, impactful story experience, which I'm not saying that was the end or that they were weighing, but it does, to me, looking at it, that's kind of what we're having. That's where our discussion is going. Is like we're talking about it from our experience now as people who have already played it, and we were enjoying those boss fights. And so there's a sense of there's a selfish part of me that goes, can we make these a little shorter? Because these boss fights are actually like legitimately fun, and I want to be stoked when I see this come up in the roulette. But at the same time, then I think about Kristen's playing now, Katie's playing now, their first times through, and I'm like, I'm glad they're going to see that play out in full speed. Maybe not the Nero scene, but the Gaius elevator. Now we're going to talk about Ultima Weapon, which is the biggest standout here, really. Thousand Maws was already a dungeon, was already a 4-man, but greatly improved. Castrum and Praetorium, greatly improved, as well as now 4-mans down from 8. Ultima Weapon now is straight up a trial. So Praetorium is now in 3 pieces, with Praetorium, Ultima Weapon, and then a single player quest experience, essentially. But now Ultima Weapon has been moved into, it's been trialified. It's the trialification of Ultima Weapon is what we're going to talk about here.
Again, what can you say but clean? With 4 people gone, you get to experience this battle, and it is more dynamic. It has all those modern indicators and mechanics inside of it, and it feels like an epic moment where you throw down. And getting to play this as DPS, it was just so meaningful to see my hits move the bar. I was there participating in this final climactic moment.
To me, this hit on like a really personal level because our experience going through the MSQ and just like truly getting our bearings as Final Fantasy XIV players alongside the community because of the folks that are a part of our YouTube channel now, like our community, you folks down there in the comments, like, it's not just a ploy for the almighty algorithm. Like, it's awesome to read your comments. And a big part of this experience has been like the suggestion over and over again that, hey, when you go and do the non-required Realm Reborn content, the non-required, when I say required, I mean non-MSQ content from Realm Reborn, from Heaven's Ward, which are things we've been doing lately, is checking back in on that stuff before we move on to Stormblood. Over and over, time and time again, we are suggested do it on min-eye level. Everyone basically kind of says something along the lines of, it's harder, but it's not hard. The fights are going to last longer. You're going to actually get to see the mechanics. You're going to get a better fight experience. And with Castrum and Praetorium, and now what they've done here by, segmenting Ultima Weapon out of Praetorium and being its own trial, what they've done with all of these boss fights, I think, is find that happy medium where it feels a little bit more like going into something on min-eye level, while still, to me, these do still seem like things that, for the most part, you're going to clear on your first try. But they're not going to be super fast. They're not going to be over before you can blink. And you're going to actually get to feel like you accomplished something, because you are going to have to dodge. You're going to have to do mechanics, or you're going to die. All of these changes that we're talking about here with Thousand Maws, Castrum, Praetorium, just this modernization, it is a bit of a streamline, but I also feel it is a way to bring this content into the modern feeling of Final Fantasy XIV. And it's like, I feel it's almost capped off by Cape Westwind, because that was a memeable moment. I mean, it was an actual community meme. Everyone talks up Cape Westwind, and then you get through it and you're like, whoa, wait, that was it? It just feels like the cherry on top of everything we just talked about in terms of improving the Realm Reborn experience.
It's the beginning of the end. You're facing down the final team of bad guys, and you would queue longer than the fight was, and the mechanics simply didn't matter with the passage of time. So now it's an independent trial. You go in there, 1v1 them, part of your story, and that will be that for Cape Westwind. Now, for the purposes of the Wall of Trials, we're going to go ahead and cement that legacy style so everyone remembers just how bad it was. Bottom of the barrel for us all to enjoy. A touchstone. We'll remember it as it was fondly. Interestingly enough, this now means that your first 8-man trial is actually after a Realm Reborn proper in the patches, with Thorn March. Good King Moogle is your first exposure to that many spell effects, and frankly, Good King Moogle is already complete chaos, so hey, I think it works. It's
definitely an upgrade from Cape Westwind. While I don't think it's a bombshell addition in terms of like looking at this patch as a whole, but I find adventurer plates just charming as hell. I don't want to say insignificant because it doesn't feel that way because it is so full featured, but it is like such a tiny piece of the overall Final Fantasy XIV product. But dude, I spent like 15 minutes messing with this and I was speeding because we were on stream and I wanted to get to like playing things. I'm going to go back in and tweak with this more. Like I'm so surprised by how much functionality this thing has, how much customization you can apply to your adventurer plate.
It's just a nice bit of decoration of that customization that makes Final Fantasy feel more lived in again, and getting to let people know immediately when you're meeting them what activities you like, what your schedule might be, whether or not your butt's going to be the primary part of the picture, if it's going to be your face. Plus, these also move on to be your PvP portraits too. So just it's a nice flavoring for the world and one more thing to play with.
Yes, PvP, which has new additions. And we had our first PvP experience, Kyle. It was an interesting new player experience.
All the abilities are different. The map's entirely new. The place was packed, which is a huge moment for PvP in Final Fantasy XIV, as it has been largely ignored as kind of the community feel on it. There's lots of wind training, so there's all kinds of weird restrictions. You can't go in as a party, and there's tons of menus and things to figure out. This is not just a drop-in for fun kind of thing. We got to do a lot of learning before we try this again.
I feel a sense of a lot of homework to be done to get a lot out of PvP, which is interesting because they put a very, very tasty looking carrot at the end of the PvP stick for me because they have armor that is so dark and metal and emo, and I must have it.
I think just queuing up solo enough to brute force the learning curve is the way to do it. And hopefully in the future, they'll allow small parties to join.
So what do you think of 6.1? Very curious, like what seasoned players think about these updates to pretty old content. And also, if you can quickly teach me how to make sense of PvP where I don't need to go watch very long videos or read extensive guides, I'd really appreciate it. Leave a comment below. And as always, be sure to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so that you don't miss the latest uploads from Kyle and me. New uploads every Wednesday morning. And you can get in touch with us personally. I mentioned the Twitter. I'm on Twitter at Garrett Art. Kyle is at Kyle Ferguson. But until next time, GG.